we set off for a hospital with Elliot. Gerhard drove up to the door of the ER so I wouldn't have to walk. As I got out of the car, I was overwhelmed by a huge spell of dizziness and a wave of panic, and I told Gerhard that I couldn't make it inside. A man by the door noticed us and helpfully came to bring a wheelchair, which I managed to sit down on. Gerhard parked the car and then came with me into the waiting room. While I was waiting for my turn with the triage nurse, I felt myself going from bad to worse. To avoid feeling too dizzy, I had to lie back on my chair with my feet up on another chair. Then I suddenly started to shake, my arms began spasming in a really unnerving way. I couldn't understand what was happening to me. I remember the faces of people around me. They couldn't help but look at this poor mother with such a young baby, who must have seemed in a really bad way. When it was my turn at triage, Gerhard pushed my wheelchair to the nurse's desk. She asked me a few questions about my condition and took some notes. When she tried to take my blood pressure, my spasms started again. In a slightly cool tone of voice, she asked me to stop moving. She must not have realized that I had no control at all over these convulsions, but I pointed this out to her straight away. She seemed surprised, and I think this made her appreciate how urgent my situation was. I started feeling a little better as we waited to be seen by a doctor. The spasms stopped, and I was able to feed Elliot, who fortunately was remarkably calm. Gerhard was worrying about me, and he was really concerned that we might be there for ages, especially when he heard people around him saying that they had already been there for more than 4 hours. At one point, he was tempted to leave the ER and go to the walk-in clinic, but I convinced him we should stay. I had a feeling that with my condition, I was going to have to stay in hospital. To our great surprise and relief, within an hour I was called to another room where a doctor was going to see me soon. However, Gerhard couldn't come with me while he had Elliot. A nurse told me that it was to protect my baby from germs. They would have to wait for me on the other side of a closed door. I was asked to sit down and wait for the doctor to see me. I don't know how much time passed, but to me it seemed like ages. In the end, I decided to ignore the nurse's warning, and I got Gerhard and Elliot to join me in the room. I wanted them to stay with me. They kept me calm. In any case, Elliot was going to need feeding again soon. Eventually, a doctor came to see me and asked us to follow him into another waiting room. He didn't make any comment about Gerhard and Elliot being there. There was no bed available for the moment. I still felt giddy, and I would really have liked to lie down while I was waiting. When a nurse came to ask me for a urine sample, another powerful dizzy spell swept over me. I told her that I really didn't feel well and that I wasn't going to be able to make it to the bathroom. She seemed highly skeptical. Seeing me in such a state and with a nurse who wasn't being all that understanding, Gerhard demanded they find a bed so I could lie down. After a few minutes, they showed me to an available bed. I had real difficulty getting over to it. I felt unable to walk by myself. I had to cling onto Gerhard's arms and keep my head bent over to stop myself fainting. The nurse tried to persuade me that I was able to walk. Her expression and general demeanor showed a real lack of sympathy for me. Gerhard and I felt that she doubted the severity of my condition and that she wasn't taking me seriously. Gerhard took greater exception to this than I did, and once I was lying on the bed and felt a little better, I encouraged him not to make too much of a big deal out of it. I would find a way to put this nurse in her place in due course. A moment later, another nurse turned up to take my temperature and my blood pressure. Her gentleness and understanding were really comforting. Although she was not in a position to diagnose me, she tried to reassure me by saying that my condition probably wasn't as bad as I thought. The simple matter of speaking calmly with her made me feel better enough to go to the bathroom and collect a urine sample. When I looked in the mirror, I noticed some reddish patches on my chest. I had no idea where they had come from, but I didn't worry about them too much. Then a doctor finally came to examine me. He seemed really puzzled, not knowing what he could say to explain my condition. That was when another dizzy spell came over me and I started to spasm again. This was followed by the appearance of more red patches on my chest, which disappeared once the spasms had calmed down. I was glad the doctor could see these symptoms, and I really hoped he would know why they were there. When I asked him, he looked at me without knowing quite how to respond. It was clear that he didn't understand what was happening to me. All he could suspect for the moment was that I might have a virus, but he wasn't sure where it might have come from. That terrified me. My imagination started running wild. I imagined myself suffering from an incurable illness which would quickly lead to death. I looked at my husband, who was holding our sleeping child tenderly in his arms. There was clearly fear in his eyes, but he didn't say a word. And if I died, I thought, they would both be left without me. How would they survive after my death? Elliot is so young and so fragile. As a wife and a mother, it was too much for my heart to take. I told myself to calm down and think about something else. To test his theory about a viral illness, the doctor asked for me to have some blood taken and to have an X-ray taken of my lungs. Although my spasms had stopped, the nurse had real difficulty getting the syringe into one of my veins. They weren't very visible, which made her notice that I was dehydrated. I was actually really thirsty, and it felt as if I could never quench my thirst, no matter how much I drank. The doctor arranged for me to be hooked up to a drip containing only saline solution. This had an effect very quickly, and within a few minutes, I had started to feel much better. Then Gerhard took me through the X-ray room and asked the nurses to keep an eye on Elliot, whom he had tucked away safely into my bed after he had fallen asleep. I already felt much calmer, and the X-ray didn't take long. Nothing abnormal came through in the results. When Gerhard and I returned to the main room in the ER, we noticed two young men leaning over Elliot on each side of my bed. They were looking over him in silence with visible tenderness, as guardians of his sleep. This touching scene had a rather calming effect on me. They gave us a deeply comforting smile when they saw us, and we thanked them for their kind assistance. Then they left the ER, and we didn't see them again. Although they must have been a hospital staff, we never knew who they really were. The moment seemed a little strange to us, but it was profoundly moving. We were both tempted to think that two guardian angels had wanted to lend us a helping hand during these moments of difficulty.